Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. England's white ball reset kicked off with a defeat in Antigua after a Shai Hope masterclass helped the West Indies over the line. We've got an interview with Australia's World Cup hero Travis Head. We'll chat about the latest batch of England women's central contracts. We'll try not to enjoy the public spat between various Australia greats too much. Bangladesh beat New Zealand as well for the second time in 3 test matches. Uganda qualify for the T20 World Cup ahead of Zimbabwe. And we also pick our England test squads for the upcoming tour of India. I'm Yas Rana. With me today is Joe Harman and Phil Walker. But first, let's head to Mark Butcher to hear his thoughts on that West Indies win in Antigua. Butch, West Indies chased 326 with 7 balls to spare in the end. At the halfway stage, I thought 325 was more than enough for England, not necessarily because of what West Indies had, but more because of how the pitch played. It was two-paced, bounce was variable. How did you see the run chase? What happened there? Obviously, Hope and Shepherd played brilliantly, but how did you see West Indies getting to 325?
Well, I didn't actually, to be honest with you. I mean, there was that horrible period of the run chase where Casey Carty at number 3 sort of came in and just, well, what did he chew up? He ended up with 16 from 39 balls, and Shai Hope was looking sort of and he actually stayed very calm, and that was something that I noticed on commentary from watching the game, was that he, instead of sort of losing his marbles and getting frustrated and trying to overhit the ball, he seemed to be completely oblivious to the fact that the guy at the other end was kind of losing them the game, which was real testament to his class and maturity. And I just thought, as you know, all the while, as long as England sort of continue to sort of hit the pitch hard and exploit that uneven bounce, and of course the spinners had a great day, didn't they? They ended up with 3 for 90 from 20 overs between Livingston and Ray and Ahmed, and the ball turned. You just thought, well, there's just no chance whatsoever. England hold their nerve and everything will be fine. And then, of course, Romario Shepherd enters the picture, and England go to a lot of slower balls. Tactically, some of the fields were not particularly good. You got Sam Curran bowling over the wicket, splaying the ball across them with no one at third man. They kept scything it over there. There was a complete sort of, it was a bit of a meltdown out in the field, to be perfectly honest, in terms of decision making, in terms of, from both the bowlers and from the captaincy. So, the huge amount of respect for Romario Shepherd, and then of course Shai Hope continued to do what he'd done all the way through, which was just completely keep his cool until it got down to the end there, where he had the chance to sort of to apply the coup de grace with the 3 sixes at the death to kill it off with plenty of balls to go. It was a brilliant innings from him. It was England for 3/4 of the game, I guess, had looked like they were going to win it and were in complete control. But as soon as a little bit of pressure went back in their direction, they folded a bit, which was disappointing.
It was a brilliant innings from Hope. It was the sort of innings that England players haven't really played in quite a long time in ODI cricket. He's got 16 ODI hundreds now, averages more than 50 in the format. For a long time, there was an accusation that he didn't score quickly enough. But actually, this year, his strike rate has been around 100, the average 50, 60. He's been a really talented player for a long time. For whatever reason, it's not clicked in Test cricket. His ODI strike rate has not been as high as it could be. What do you make of Hope as a player? Because that was a brilliant innings, and how he sort of kept West Indies in it for a long time without taking too many risks. And then when Shepherd went, when they still needed about 10 and over, he took them over the line.
Yeah, I mean, his numbers speak for themselves. So he joins what Kohli and Viv Richards in terms of the amount of innings it's taken him to get to 5,000 ODI runs, which means only Babar and Hashim Amla are above him in terms of the pace of getting there. And of course, he's had to do that in the midst of a sort of a drought, really, from other players in the West Indian lineup. So it's all, comparisons with the way that Lara sort of carried the West Indies at the back end of the 90s, early 2000s are completely valid. Yes, of course, West Indies have spent a bit of time playing against teams outside of the sort of top echelon, so those numbers perhaps are a little bit inflated, or not inflated, but at least the opposition that he has played against has not perhaps always been of the highest quality in comparison with the other guys on that list. But my goodness me, he's still a fine player. And don't forget, of course, he's broken English hearts before with that incredible run chase at Headingley. I can't remember what year that was
2017, I think, yeah.
So, he has it. So mentally, He's got everything there. And then I suppose it's just been a question of sort of his talent and ball striking talent sort of catching up with what is already a brilliant sort of mind for run chases and for making consistent runs in 50 over cricket. And you're right to make the comparison with England. I think we made the point at half time, myself and Alex Tudor on the radio, that you know England's fast starts is very much a 2020 type innings from England, wasn't it? Lots of guys getting in, making 100 run a ball and plus scores of 30s, 40s, 20s, which in T20 cricket is absolutely fine. You have no issue with that. But in the 50 over game, you need a little bit more than that from players once they get themselves in. It turns, once you get off to that fast start, it kind of turns into a test match for that batter. You have the responsibility to kind of make sure that you make the most of it. And it looked to me as though, on a positive note for England, it looked to me as though Harry Brook had really sort of taken something away from the World Cup, from watching and talking to players like Kohli, etc., about sort of, getting himself in. He was very, very watchful in the early part of his innings while still being able to tick over the strike with relative ease. And he got himself into a position where you thought, well, okay, here we go. We're going to see the full repertoire. But unfortunately, he was knocked over by Shepherd, who started off really badly, but sort of came back and picked up two really big wickets for the West Indies in the back end, just as England had decided that he was the man that they were going to go after. So, but encouraging stuff from Brook in the mould of what sort of Shai Hope was able to do. But beyond that, the rest of it, Sam Curran had a terrific day with the bat. Bryden Cast had a terrific day with the bat. England got 326 by virtue of numbers 7 and 8 kind of doing what the top order should have done. And that really ought to have been enough for them. But at the end with the ball, they were awful.
As you say, it's an odd innings to analyse because 325, good score. The way they got there, not particularly conventional. They relied on the runs from Curran and Cast at the end, and they got off to such a good start at the start. When I was watching the post-match presentation, Shai Hope credited a conversation he had with MS Dhoni as to how he's shaped his approach in ODI cricket. And Dhoni said something along the lines of, there is always more time than you think. And it struck me as like, that is one World Cup winning captain who's got one way of thinking about things in ODI cricket. England obviously have another ODI World Cup winning captain in Owen Morgan sort of hovering behind their shoulder the entire time saying England need to go harder, go harder, go harder. And it struck me that there is more than one way to go about things in 50 over cricket. And I wonder if England could benefit from an actual reset rather than essentially what this is some sort of tribute act to the 2015 to 19 squad. Because the one thing, if you look at the players they have now, in Brook, Buttler, Livingston in particular, you have three genuinely world-class death hitters, yet they very, very rarely come in anywhere near the death. I know Brook and Buttler are better than that, but you saw how South Africa negotiated 50 overs to play to the strengths of the best players they had. At the moment, if you look at England's World Cup campaign, their best performance was against Pakistan when they lost their third wicket in the 41st over. And Buttler, Brook, etc. could come in at the time of innings where they could really make a difference. And it feels like England are quite close-minded as to how to go around batting 50 overs. Because I know they got a good score here yesterday, but it wasn't in a sustainable way, I thought.
No, well, and also if Zach Crawley had been taken, it was a terrible drop by Moti off the bowling of Correa, who was impressive in the first sort of 6 or 7 overs of his spell. Crawley was put down, and Josh Buttler would have been walking to the crease around about the 18th, 19th over, which, as you quite rightly say, is not the plan. Is not what he's down there at number 6 for. And that is by virtue of the top order playing T20 cricket, playing T20 style innings in a 50 over game. And you're absolutely right. There's nothing I can disagree with what you said there. That there is so much more time. And if the opposition, put it this way, England managed to bat out 50 overs just about by the skin of their teeth yesterday. But if you're facing 45 to 48 for the most part, no matter how many runs you'll get, and the opposition decides to take up the 50 overs to get your score, they're going to chase it down. Unless you bowl a heck of a lot better or, at the death than England have been capable of doing recently. So, You're absolutely right. That there does need to be a little bit of a rethink in terms of, well, how do we get the best out of the resources we have with the bat? I think Phil Salt is wildly talented, as is Will Jackson. The pair of them will kind of work it out between them. And Harry Brook, in a very small sample size, seems to have kind of made some strides mentally as to how he wants to go about it as well. The Duckett Crawley sort of partnership was an interesting one. Chances galore, a lot of risks being taken. England looking to hit boundaries out of the power play almost exclusively. Or not seeming to be particularly happy to be scoring in singles is perhaps the better way to look at it. If you're going to take as many risks as England do, then you are going to leave yourselves open to being knocked over. And the one thing that the legacy of Owen Morgan's team is not about what happens with England, it's how other teams are much better at scoring big totals than perhaps they used to be. And there was a really stark example of that yesterday.
On to the second. You said England made a few mistakes towards the end. What do you make of Butler not turning to Will Jacks as England's sixth bowling option? Because that was a day where England could have done with the sixth bowler taking some overs off bowlers 4 and 5.
Yeah, well, look, we don't know. I don't know if there's some injury or something that prevents Will Jacks from bowling. But England have always been very happy to use more than 5 bowlers. I mean, I can't remember the last time they used 5 exclusively and didn't go elsewhere for 2 or 3. They had the absolute bonus of Liam Livingstone getting through all 10 and bowling really tidily. At times, the ball was turning very sharply for Rayan Ahmed. And it just seemed, that Sam Curran struggled with the brand new ball. He was given a role that is much more suited to, or something that he would want more than coming on after the power play, and it didn't go well for him with the new ball. And so it seemed entirely obvious. You had Hetmeyer in there as a left-hander. You could have thrown Jacks the ball for 3-4 overs, maybe skip through a few while that ball was turning, while they were still consolidating in the middle and not quite sure how they were going to get to 325, which would have left you less exposed at the back end, to having to bowl all of the overs of Carson Curran at the end. But then having decided not to do that, and again, I don't know, long way away from there, have no idea, didn't hear anything that there was an injury or some sort of problem for Jacks that prevented him from bowling, but it just seemed so obvious that was the right thing to do. And then of course, all of the talk halfway point, and we saw it. Liam Livingstone's dismissal from Alzari Joseph, where the ball scuttled along the ground. That bowlers bowling cross seam or seam up even, but banging the ball hard into the deck, the ball would come off at 2 or 3 different heights all the way through the innings, and it happened in England's innings as well. And yet, when it got down to it, when the Shepherd onslaught began, it was pace off, slower balls, looking for Yorkers, trying to get the ball up in the slot. I always remember a conversation that used to go around the Surrey dressing room and sort of in Adam Hollyoak's time. And when you were playing on surfaces like that, he would say sort of half volley Yorker is a crime, criminal, full toss, criminal delivery to bowl on a deck where it's too paced. I don't mind if you run up and bowl back of a length and it comes off normally and a guy smashes it over mid wicket for 6. I have no problem with that. If you run up and bowl, attempt to Yorker, miss it, and it's a half volley on a deck where it's too pace and you get smoked out of the ground, I'm coming for you. It was that type of thing. Or slower ball, pace off, and it sits up and you get whacked. Not having it. You just keep smashing the pitch as hard as you can, and eventually one will roll along the deck, or the batters will be waiting for some sort of invariable bounce, and you'll get them out that way. And that didn't happen. The quicks went almost exclusively for slower balls, and even when Sam Curran went for pace on deliveries, he was bowling over the wicket to the right-handed Shepherd with 2 men up at third man. How many times did he get sided over? No third man back, or remember South Africa doing it with Marco Jansen. They'd have almost like the point would be 20 yards behind square, so you could bowl it wide, and if you did side it, it would go straight to him. Just again muddled thinking, tactical sort of naivety from that team. And it's a tough one because Sam Curran had a terrific day with the bat, showed his value down there. And I saw your piece about sort of him being a luxury item with the ball. He's a terrific cricketer, but England have got to find a way of getting another specialist bowler in the team if he plays, because he and Liam Livingstone are still at the moment, you would say, half a bowler each in the 50 over format. And so, something has to give. Either one of them has to sit it out, or England pick one less batter to get another specialist bowler in. But at the moment, it isn't quite right, because with the 5 specialist bowlers they had 4 in total, if you ask me. And that's even though Liam Livingstone had a terrific day with the ball, and to be fair to him, looked as though he was about to get going with the bat before he got a classic West Indian grubber.
Yeah, I mean, just on Curran, he opened the bowling at the start of the World Cup. That was England's plan A with the players they had available. He opened the bowling again here. I just can't think of many bowlers in the world who've had success in ODI cricket who are his sort of bowler, sort of his height, his speed, but also what he's good at. There are lots of bowlers who are brilliant T20 death bowlers who haven't been able to translate that necessarily into success in 50 over cricket. Just because I think you made this point a lot. It's very different when players are coming at you and the target is 9, 10 and over, to when they're very happy to milk you at 5, 6, 7s. What do you think England should do there? Because it feels like Curran has actually played quite a lot of ODI cricket. I don't get what they're learning from playing Curran so soon after the World Cup. I sort of feel this is a good opportunity to get someone else in there. You know what Curran's strengths and weaknesses are. I'm not saying this is the end of him as an ODI cricketer. I'm not close to saying that, but he's a known entity when there are a lot of players around the setup at the moment who are not there yet.
Yeah, look, I think again, I think he's incredibly useful to England, but not as one of 5. I think as one of 6, he most certainly is, because of what he offers you with the bat as well, and his prowess at the death. Now he had a bad day at the death. Now that can happen to anybody. The more worrying thing was how ineffective he was with the brand new ball. And he's a bit down on confidence at the moment, and that's understandable after what's gone on. And England are very keen to keep him in the fray. I mean, after all, he's the second most capped player in that entire squad. So it's you either have to make a sacrifice somewhere else, which England will be loath to do because they want to bat as deep as they possibly can, or you have to think to yourself, well, if we're gonna go with the policy of having five bowlers and he is one of them, then you're going to have a bit of a problem on your hands. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if England went with exactly the same team on Wednesday, and I think they probably should. Given what we've talked about in terms of the relative lack of experience of nearly the entire squad, Butler aside, you've got to try and get as many games into these guys as you possibly can in this next cycle. But Sammy's got for the first time in his career, he's got a little bit of pressure. He's got a bit of a target on his back, and so it'll be up to him to try and turn that around. But I would absolutely love it if you're going to be playing on surfaces like the one in Antigua. England have got to make a really big play of getting more out of Will Jacks, sharing that load around a little bit more, and try to use Sam Curran at the optimal times for him, and then for goodness sake, give him the right field for the deliveries he's trying to bowl.
Well, the first ODI was a belter. Second game is on Wednesday. Cheers for your time, Butch. Catch you next week. Phil, Shai Hope is a baffling player, isn't he? He's in that Aidan Markram category of players who just continue to frustrate. Because when he's on song, there are very few players who can play innings like him. And since he's moved to number 4, he's become a properly top-tier ODI player, not just in terms of average, but strike rate as well.
Yeah, they need him desperately, and they need him focused. And they need him as the figurehead of that team. They're sort of perpetually reshaping themselves or redefining themselves or trying to make some separation from the travails of the past. And in him, you have a class cricketer, a top-class cricketer in 50 over cricket, bafflingly underperforming Test cricketer. When you think that he's done 1 or 2 things in Test cricket that are fabulous and the rest has been a disaster, it's almost like the brain has blocked his natural game in Test cricket, and perhaps he needs just to lose that. Perhaps that needs to just be something completely different. He's obviously not in the Test side at the moment anyway. But that was a brilliant innings. He puts it down to Dhoni, doesn't he? He said that he had a chat to Dhoni a year or so ago, or a few months ago, and that Dhoni helped to clarify the nature of batting in the middle order and taking run chases deep and controlling your your tempo and your heartbeat and so on. He's a top class player, but he's also surrounded by some useful cricketers, right? And sort of the ongoing psychodrama of Hetmeyer's relationship with the WICB, that seems like there's an impasse there, and so he's now in the side, and he didn't get many on Sunday, but played a useful hand. The fact that he is in that side and clearly motivated and wanting to play is useful as well. And they do have match winners in that 50-over side. You know, to have the marvellously named Romario Shepherd in there at 6.
Oh, some of those sixes,
yeah,
absolutely belts.
Yeah, totally. You know, Brandon King, I've always thought he looks like a good player up top as well. And the lad
Alec Athanaze, he was the leading run scorer in a under-19 World Cup not that long ago. He made a half-century on Test debut against India as well.
He batted
really well.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was a half-century. I think it might have been like 47, 48. But anyway, he played nicely in India. He's an interesting-looking player because he's quite languid. He's not much of him, left-hander for anyone who hasn't seen him. And he has a touch of Chanderpaul, but not quite as many idiosyncrasies as Chanderpaul. He's quite loose-limbed, though. And he plays nicely through the covers, and he plays particularly nicely off his hip. And you saw that in that 70-odd he made, or 60-odd, that he looked very, very comfortable to the ball coming into the body. And obviously, as an opening bat, you need that. So they do have interesting players in interesting positions. And you hold on to it as best as you possibly can. You know, it feels like the ship has been sinking for a long time. But if ever you need a moment to really focus the mind and play desperate cricket from here on in, then it's not qualifying for that World Cup. And in Shai Hope, as you say, they've got someone that they can actually hang this thing on.
Toby asks, although the result didn't match up, this new look England team seems to be going back to the roots of the 2015 rebuild. Do you think wins will follow, Joe?
Well, I hope some wins will follow, yeah. I don't think they are in such good shape to reset in the way that Morgan side did. There is obviously huge potential there, but I think the bowling is a real worry. I just don't see where that bowling attack is coming from. There's not world-class bowlers there. They can patch something together and there's some decent options, but they need to get back to posting massive totals and hoping the bowlers can cling on. Sam Curran's form is obviously a real worry. I don't know what's happened there. That was quite concerning, what we saw at the end of that innings there. Perhaps he just shouldn't have been on this tour. Perhaps he needs a proper breather. It would have been harrowing being part of that England side, losing every game, probably even more harrowing, losing your place and watching those defeats as he did for most of that tournament. Livingston similarly was another, a bit unlucky with the dismissal, but another one. Does he need to be there at this point? I'm not so sure he does. So I think, there is loads of potential, and I'm sure England will land on a good 50-over side, but I don't think it can be quite as simple as Morgan's philosophy. This is the side I'm going with, this is who I'm backing, and I'm going to stick with them for as long as it takes. I think there's too many question marks around at the moment for it to be as smooth sailing as that.
But just as it's uneven, so it brings into focus, they're going to play another couple of games of 50-over cricket, and then 50-over cricket gets parked again for quite a long time.
And again, how can you reset something that they'll have to reset many times because there is not a constant flow of this format?
If I was looking at it from an English perspective, then there's sure reasons to be cheerful from what you saw on Sunday, in that you have the emergence, embryonic obviously, but of a Jason Roy-like opening bat in Phil Salt, who is very, very hit and miss, but scores at a madly high strike rate and literally attacks every single ball going. So if they're looking to replicate that tempo, then he looks like he can offer something. Will Jacks didn't play particularly well, but we know that he's a pedigree player. Crawley at 3 makes sense long term. We've always said around this table that we think he's, as a 50-over player, when he's got a bit of time to get going, there's not going to be any slips in, so he can play outside the line. And then when he hits it, he stays hit, as we know. He looks like a natural number 3 or even a natural opener in 50-over cricket. And he played nicely before ran himself out. Dozily, again. But the big story is Rayan Ahmed, right? Who had a very in and out summer. Obviously came off the back of a very interesting winter with England where no one really saw that coming. Fast-tracked through. Had a slightly chastening early part of last summer. Went a bit better for Leicester towards the back end of the year, but it still felt like a like a consolidation year at best. Well, he's come back into this England side, and he bowled brilliantly, bowled beautifully. That googly is a sensation.
And more potent now that the leg break is something that he relies on.
Yeah,
he's more comfortable bowling.
That's right. And so, okay, they'd wanted to get over the line. Clearly, as Joe outlines, there are concerns in the seam attack. But if you look at throwing it a bit further forward, then Rayan Ahmed's performance there, that's a breakout performance. Now, because he's doing the trickiest job in the game, you need to see how he's going to go in the next 2 games as well. But if you are looking in the round, then that was quite a positive game of cricket, right, for England's second string, as they're trying to find 1 or 2 to move forward with.
Yeah, I guess I find the Dhoni thing you mentioned there quite interesting, in that England have gone about how they want to play 50 over cricket in exactly the same way as they thought it made sense 8 years ago with Morgan and that specific set of players. And I do wonder, especially having seen how some teams had a lot of success posting huge scores in the World Cup, that actually there are different ways of scoring 350. And I had a very similar feeling watching this to what I felt during the World Cup was, hang on, there's a lot of overs left. Who's going to be there at overs 40? And actually, they got to 325, but in part because of that excellent stand between Curran and Cast at the end. And it also could have been a lot worse. Crawley was dropped on 31, I think, when he just hit Carrara over his head for 4. The next ball he's dropped, playing a wild slog sweep. And it was like, there are so many overs left. And I guess I think it was interesting that Brook actually played in a more restrained way with that experience of the World Cup behind him. And actually, so many of these players just haven't played much 50 over cricket, so they are learning on the job.
Yeah, and I think, the World Cup we just had only emphasised how good that 2019 team was. And I think it's dangerous to fall into the trap of, oh, well, that bloke comes in and fills the Jason Roy role, or that bloke does Adil Rashid, or where do we find the next Jofra Archer? I think they're just going to have to do it differently. Phil Salt, as an example, like, he's obviously a hugely talented stroke maker, can come out and play like that, great to watch, but he's no Jason Roy. If you look at his white ball record, it's the strike rate is high, but as Phil says, he's hit and miss 250 over hundreds across his career, which isn't a huge amount of games. But when Jason Roy was in form, he was hitting 100 every 3 or 4 games, and we're not going to get to that again. So they do have to find another way to win games, and they might not have the luxury of being able to kind of go out all guns blazing in the first 15 every time, because they won't have the middle order that they had previously.
Yeah.
What the World Cup told us is that the big teams, with the exception of England, went in there with their best players in the top 3 or 4, their best, most complete batters, and that there was a reversion back to that. And it played out. It played out, obviously, for the 2 finalists. It played out for New Zealand as well, who had top quality players in their top 3 or 4. England, in this last game, have gone in with effectively two pinch hitters, in effect. Albeit, they are relatively well experienced now at opening the batting in white ball cricket, back in domestic English cricket. My instinct is to follow the model of India, Australia, and top load your 50 over side with your best players, your most complete players. And so I think it's good to see Crawley in there, for example, because he's obviously the future of English batting. And eventually Butler and Mott are going to have to make a decision on this. Do they... Is it a kind of reunion show? Is it a redux of that extraordinary team that Joe talks about? Or do they reshape it again to ape the new way of doing it, the new old way of doing it, that your most complete players are up top? It'd be interesting to see how they go. But again, it's unsatisfying because this now gets parked. This just moves along.
After the next week's show, we probably won't talk about this for about 9 months.
This is it. And the Mott question, which is obviously a big one, he will be judged on 20 over cricket now for the next 6 months, and obviously going into that tournament, assuming that he's still in place, as I imagine he will be, and he probably should be on balance. They are still world champions in 20 over cricket, so that's where they're going to be judged from here on in. And 50 over stuff, we can forget about it.
By the time the next pod is out, England might have picked their test squad for the India tour that starts next month. So we've had a go of picking the squads ourselves. Joe, what's your... We've gone with 17 players in each squad, which sounds about right.
So before Joe begins, his squad is exactly the same as yours.
It's exactly the same, and there was no...
and Phil's
we didn't talk about it.
Phil's is one difference.
Phil's is one different, yeah.
And that's quite surprising. for a 17-strong squad. But
it is.
I think we all maybe felt that England's options aren't hugely strong.
And I'd also say that I think the squads that we've picked, I'll be very surprised if that's a squad that England picked.
For sure.
Yeah.
And one of the big reasons is what's happening on this Lions training camp at the moment, where they picked a number of players, a few wild cards in there, and there will be one or two plucked probably from that squad that we obviously aren't privy to. So we don't know how Tom Hartley's gone. We don't know how John Turner's gone. We don't know how James Rue's stepped up.
But even so, even if you're impressed by them, a training camp's a training camp, isn't it? It's not like they're playing Sri Lanka A. I don't know.
Sure, and there aren't many spots available for sure, but there's always one or two.
Well, spin-wise, yeah. I mean,
no one had Rayan Ahmed, for example, in their squad last year for Pakistan, for example. Yeah, so there will always be. Well, there tends to be one or two, but there aren't many places, and whoever ends up with it, it's not exactly the longest of straws anyway, is it?
Joe, do you want to go through your 17-man squad?
Sure. Crawley, Duckett, Pope, Root, Stokes, Brooke, Jacks, Bairstow, Folkes as my keepers. My seamers, Robinson, Wood, Tongue, Anderson, Atkinson, and my spinners, Leach, Rayan Ahmed, and Liam Dawson. I've got one person who's reluctant, Dawson, seemingly to tour, and Will Jacks didn't sound overly enthused by the idea either. So it might even be taken out of England's hands to an extent. But that's the best 17 I could come up with.
Sorry, I would be shocked if Dawson, if he's selected, says no, or if they're having conversations behind closed doors at the moment. I'd be amazed. I know that he's been treated shoddily by England and should have been given more of a chance, probably. Certainly been respected a little bit more. But he has a chance here. He's 33, 34?
33, I think.
He has a chance to out-bowl Jack Leach across 5 test matches in India, and obviously because he's a superior batter and they're looking for multi-dimensional cricketers, he has a chance to become England's premier spinner, right? For the next 2 or 3 years.
He does have a chance. If you look at the history of English spinners going to India and whether it either boosts or reduces their prospects of continuing their career, you might be better holding tight for the winter and then seeing how it looks next summer.
Sure, but if he says no this winter, then that's no for good.
Sure, but and obviously under all this is the money, and he's in the SA20, which pays very well. It's you talk about his age as it's now or never, but you might also think of it, well, I'm getting to the stage of my career where I just need to earn as much as I possibly can. It would be, I would never have thought that would be what anyone would think a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, but now I'm not so sure. And and the fact he said it publicly, it's obviously, you don't come out and say that publicly unless you're really thinking about it, because he's not done his chances any good there, I would say.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because I think
I'd be shocked. I'll still be shocked. I hear everything. The landscape's changing by the week. I'll still be shocked.
Yeah, I think his predicament is especially complicated because financially he'll be earning more money going to the SA20 than playing the Test series. He's on something between 150 and 200 grand in the SA20. Also, it's not as if there's any guarantee that he plays in India, given he's been on so many tours for England in years gone by. And it's not just the money that he doesn't get from the SA20, it's the chance to establish a relationship there and that being like a year-to-year banker for him. Whereas if you look at his last 7 years, there have been times where he should have played more for England and he just didn't. He's gone on tours and not played. And that is a real risk for him to take. And I guess there's nothing that England have done in the last year. I guess for him, the Moeen recall must have hurt at some level, given how he was doing domestically. There's nothing that England have done over the last year that suggested that Dawson's going to play, even if he makes the initial squad. So I understand why that's difficult. I'm with you. I'm with you on Jacks. If Jacks end up not going, that's completely different in my opinion because of the stage he's at in his career, and actually given his higher worth in these T20 leagues, he gets IPL deals. Liam Dawson doesn't. So I think that's a different conversation.
Sure.
All that said, I mean, Ben Stokes is pretty good at getting what he wants. If he really wants Liam Dawson on that tour, then I imagine a phone call would probably do the job. But there hasn't been, as you say, there hasn't been much to suggest that England hugely rate Dawson or desperately want him on these tours, other than as a sort of stopgap or fill-in when they don't have the resources in spin-friendly conditions.
Yeah, but if you were to look at it, and we can't look at this landscape without considering money anymore, but if you were to look at it purely on cricketing level,
it's definitely a chance.
Then
it's definitely a chance for him.
Dawson was superb last summer in the shadows. You know, and Leach, as we know, is a decent bowler and an honest bowler, and Stokes likes him for the control he brings. But Dawson would bring that plus an extra element as well. And there's not a vast ocean between Leach and Dawson as left arm spinners. But yeah, you're right. Money doesn't talk; it swears.
Who's Phil's difference then?
So
you've not picked Jacks.
Yeah, that's right. So I didn't pick Jacks, in part because I don't think they want to pick Jacks, and there is also that sort of question mark against him. But also I was thinking about it, and India don't have many left-handers, and so Jacks as a sort of conventional right arm off break bowler is going to be up against it. They're all up against it, but Jacks in particular, I think, would be up against it, and so I went with Lawrence or Roux, and Roux or Lawrence, and I went back and forth with both of them. And I think I sent over Lawrence in the end, but Roux was coming 10 seconds before I sent the email to you. I can't really split them. I think I went with Lawrence perhaps because he has the slightly more flexible option as a reserve batter, in that he can bat in the top 3 or 4 if needs be. If someone breaks a finger, if Pope has to open the batting because one of the openers goes down, then you could potentially put him in the top 3 or 4. He played nicely in the final Test match in India on his debut tour. Played really nicely, a couple of 45s on a ragging turner, and played expansively and creatively, which you're going to need, you would imagine, out there. And he made good runs in Sri Lanka on his debut. So there's a bit in his favour there.
If it does come down to a choice between those two, I'd be very surprised if they don't go for Lawrence.
Yeah, possibly. They like him as well around the team.
He's been backup batter a lot.
Yeah,
experienced in the subcontinent.
The one thing about Roux, being a left-hander, they've only got Duckett and Stokes in their top 8, 9, whatever. And against, you're going to have obviously Ashwin's going to play, Jadeja's going to play almost certainly all 5, and Axar Patel might play 3 or 4 as well. They might just go in like that.
Yeah.
So having another left-hander in there, someone who's small and compact and can sweep, might be something that they would consider as well, to try and nullify that angle.
It's a tough first Test tour, straight up, isn't it?
Sure.
If you really rate him and think he's got a bright future, then don't take him.
Right, yeah. But then you know, Lawrence would have been in a similar position 3 or 4 years ago when that tour was coming around, and didn't go great, but did okay, and probably slightly enhanced his nascent reputation at the time. You don't turn it down. And look, if you have one good afternoon in India across 3 or 4 Test matches as a young greenhorn batter, then you've done well.
It's worth saying that I think this is going to be a really hard 11 to pick eventually, because you've got Pope returning from injury, and also Folkes back in the fray, where they tend to value his extra keeping quality. We won't do it now, but I think that's going to be a very, very hard 11 to pick. I think at least one very established player is probably not playing the first Test if everyone is available.
Yeah, indeed.
And yeah, I think that's going to be a surprise almost, whoever it is. I just wanted to go back to the spinners. Joe, we're going to talk about finger spin in more detail later in the pod, but we've gone with Leach, who's effectively the incumbent, Dawson, very experienced, Rahan Ahmed, leg break bowler who took a 5-run Test debut, obviously. I think one area where I think England will differ to us is I think there will be a spinner who's probably a lot less experienced who ends up going. A lot of the chat is Tom Hartley being that person. He averaged around about 45 with the ball for Lancashire last year. India tours of Asia, England have a recent history of picking inexperienced players, and it doesn't go well. Spinners, 3 years ago they had Dom Bess, Amar Verdi, Matt Pongs, and Mason Crane went on that tour in one capacity or another. None of them are close to being involved now. What do you make of how England go about that? They've picked lots of young spinners for this training camp in the UAE, including, for example, Josh De Cares, who a year ago wasn't even bowling spin really for Middlesex. So it feels like that whoever they pick is, sort of lambs to the slaughter, picking guys who don't really make the county side necessarily. You're up against Ashwin. Good luck.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like that, but they've also gone the other way in the past. They picked the most experienced spinner they possibly could in Gareth Batty, but the fact is there aren't many experienced spinners, and not many spinners get a lot of overs under their belt. So I don't know where you are meant to pluck these players from. I can't think of... experienced counties spinners who just get through the overs, who at least would have those overs under their belt out there. So you've got to take a punt, unless you go for even in R3, we've got Rian Ahmed in there. That's still a punt. I know he's got some test wickets.
Massive.
It's a massive punt. I mean, Tom Hartley, to me, I don't really feel in a strong position to judge. I've seen clips of him online. I've watched a bit of him in white ball cricket. Don't think India will be terrified by what they see, but that's not really his fault. He's just not had a season of this stuff. I mean, the fact that Lancashire have gone and picked up Nathan Lyon for the whole of next year would suggest Tom Hartley's not going to play a huge amount of red ball cricket. I know Ben tweeted that he thought Hartley would play more tests for England this winter than he'll play for red ball matches for Lancashire next summer, possibly tongue in cheek, but I think there's a bit of truth in that as well. I mean,
he's doing a tweet.
Bumble was picking him out quite early doors. There's obviously some energy behind him. It's hard to know how much of that is in the media and how much of that is in the thoughts of Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum. But if you're going to take a punt, it seems as good as any, given he's a tall left armer who drives the ball into the pitch. But any success he has out there would have to be a surprise, I'm afraid, because there's nothing in his record to suggest that it will go overly well for him.
Yeah, all of that really. Jack Carson's another one who's got height. Yeah, right arm conventional off break bowler. He possibly has an outside chance, but it's a fool's errand, isn't it? Let's be honest. The most important bowlers in our 17s are, in order for me, Ollie Robinson, Mark Wood, and maybe Jimmy Anderson, really. Leach, you assume, will do the donkey work and will have a day or two out. He bowled nicely out there last time out. And as we know, Stokes likes him. But it's the seamers, really. And Robinson could have some fun on the pitches that are up and down, and a bit of reverse swing may come into play for Mark Wood. But if England are going to do anything at all, then they're going to have to take wickets, really, with their seamers, as ever.
And also, as well, I think you can get a little bit, you can overly fixate on certain potential pitches in India. As we saw in the World Cup, pitches can be so diverse. And last time England went to India, the pitch is a very weird tour. It was still COVID time. You had 2 tests at one venue and 2 tests at another. And the Ahmedabad pitches in particular turned a lot. It's not necessarily going to be like that. England's last tour to India in 2016, there were some really, really flat pitches. England scored 450 one test match and still lost by an innings. So the pitches can be very, very different.
It was the Karen Nair 300 game.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the Australia tour last year is probably a better barometer. The pitches in the early part of the series when India are looking to get on top will give you plenty. And then if they are on top, then you're not going to get a rag in Turner necessarily in the final test matches. That's what happened in that Australia tour when it was pretty much a ball draw in the end, and India took the series. What happened when England went out there, the Joe Root winter, when he made 2 doubles, I think, in Sri Lanka, and then another double in the first test. That pitch was too flat. England won the toss and won the game in a conventional, old-fashioned way as the pitch crumbled on day 4 or 5. You're not going to get much of that, I don't think. And it's going to be a tear-up. Certainly the first half of the series will be.
And you'd say, I mean, even if there is a little bit of something in it for the seamers, you'd say, I mean, Shami in the form that he was in the World Cup, different format, but if he bowls like that in any format, he's going to be a real tester. And Bumrah's fit and firing. You'd say India's seamers have got the edge over England's anyway. Not as the differential between England's spinners and India's spinners isn't as big, but the concern is that I don't think even in seam-friendly conditions that England would be like, brilliant, this is for us, because I think India would also be pretty devastating.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
Yeah, we've got 6 weeks.
Actually, this is interesting because, Phil, usually you manage to find some optimism about an England tour. Even before every Ashes tour, you still think they've got a chance, despite having seen them get hammered 3 times yourself out there.
And yet miscast as a washed-up old cynic. Yeah,
well, that's after that's one test into the series.
When the whole edifice comes crashing down.
But no, it's deflating that you can't even muster that a month or so out from.
I think England will nick one.
Win the test.
Yeah, because I think Stokes makes things happen, and you can win a couple of tosses, and you can put runs on the board. I think England might win a test, but
also those
but it will be 4-1 or 3-1 at best, and you'd shake hands on that. And you come home and you say, "Look at my World Test Championship points."
As we saw in 2021 as well, those pitches that turn more, if that's the way it ends up going, they actually could be a bit of a leveler because it brings inferior spinners into it more. Like Joe Root's
and that Ahmedabad Test match you spoke about, on paper, I think England lost it by like 9 wickets or something. But that game was so mad that could have gone any way.
Yeah, they were only maybe 60 runs away from making that.
That's
very,
right.
very interesting.
And the first test of that series, they won it by miles.
Well, that test, Rohit Sharma was the Rohit Sharma test. He got 100,
got
wasn't
160.
He? Yeah, so I mean that was the difference.
160.
That was the difference, really, wasn't it?
In a game where on day 2, Joe takes 5 for 9.
Yeah,
and Rohit got 160. Good player.
Yeah.
Good player.
Moving on, the ECB announced the latest batch of women's central contracts this week. 18 players received them, including Danny Gibson and Maya Bouchier for the first time. There were displays of faith in Tash Farrant and Izzy Wong, who both received contracts. Wong's been out the side recently, and Farrant's been just out of the game, really. She's not playing much cricket at all the last year or two, while Lauren Filer was given a development contract.
I was surprised at that last bit.
Yeah. That was probably the most surprising bit.
Certainly, when you take into, I think with Tash Farrant it's a bit different because she'd been injured. They gave her a central contract, and then she got injured and didn't get a chance to prove anything. So I can see why they've said, right, just renew it. Let's see how you go. But that Filer seems to be below Izzy Wong in the pecking order there, even though that's not been the way it's been when it's come to team selection. I think is a bit odd.
Yeah,
but
I wonder
also
if
with a tearaway quick, you'd think all the more so keep her inside the tent and nurture her and manage her workload.
She's still got a development contract, and I guess there's an argument that central contracts are just complicated, and it's not just a reward for form. It's also predicting who's going to be about, and also I guess it's what other options you have. And at the moment, Wong is in the Women's Premier League. Filer isn't yet getting attention from the WBBL or the Women's Premier League yet. So and so far she's shown more in the longer formats, so I guess that's something that Wong has over her. Just thinking out loud on that.
There might also be a sense
think it is weird. Yeah,
it's been a very tricky 12 months for Izzy Wong, and maybe a demotion when a lot of it seems to be kind of confidence related is not the best thing at this stage anyway. And if they think she's going to be great in 3, 4, 5 years and beyond, then there is some logic in sticking with her for the time
being.
Absolutely.
Just briefly, TNT, formerly BT, just announced an hour or so before the show that they're taking the tour of India, the England Women's Tour of India, including the Test match, and covering it all live, ball by ball. So that's great, because we were running the risk of that whole series being unavailable, certainly to UK audiences. So again, that's another shot in the arm for the game.
That first T20I starts tomorrow, by the way, 2 p.m. UK time. I guess the build up to the 2024 T20 World Cup in Bangladesh starts here, and given how badly England played Sri Lanka spinners at home, this is a real test to see where they're at, because there are significant question marks of how they play spin, and if they're struggling at home, then you really worry for them in Asia. Moving on, the ECB has announced the launch of the Cricket Regulator, a new independent body responsible for monitoring compliance with the game's regulations and enforcing adherence to those regulations, as well as providing relevant information and education. The Cricket Regulator was a recommendation from the ICEC report earlier in the year, which detailed structural inequalities across the English game. Jack asks, how will the new Cricket Regulator work in practical terms? Can it truly be an independent regulator if its money is still coming from the ECB? I guess just from the press release, it said the Cricket Regulator is ring-fenced from the ECB, and that separation will ensure that their work is distinct from the ECB's work as the game's promoter. I think it's too early to really comment on how independent it is, right? We don't really know how it's... We've been told how it's going to work, but we've not seen anything that contradicts that, I guess. And I guess some people have taken issue that the money is still coming from the ECB, but I think, Phil, as you made the point, where else is the money going to come from?
Yeah, indeed. I don't think there's much kicking around in Whitehall or Westminster at the minute anyway. So not that's going to be freed up. So there's that natural instinct to be sceptical, but I choose not to be on this issue. It was a clear recommendation from ICEC. It's been instituted 3 months in, and there's a handful of independent, unaligned figures who are now involved in it, including this retired police officer who has no previous links whatsoever to the ECB or to cricket itself. And the tightrope is so thin anyway for the ECB. Also, let's be fair, there will be genuine desire from this new broom to improve the glaring iniquities that were laid bare by this report. Nobody, certainly in this new broom at the ECB, are keen to maintain the status quo. But it's a balancing act. Of course it is. All of it is. And it's a challenging time for them, massively challenging financially. And for all that there were understandable frustrations that came out a couple of months ago regarding pay disparities, in particular between men and women, and these kinds of things, they can be unsatisfying, they can be frustrating. But speaking to people inside the ECB, the landscape is changing so fast, and it's such a high wire act that they have to perform, really. And so I'd certainly hesitate to be sceptical about this latest move. I don't think they've done it purely as a box ticking exercise. I think
they have to know,
and good.
I think they have to know they can't get away with it as a box ticking exercise, because previously I think clearly there had been a huge amount of complacency or even disregard for equality within cricket, and probably the people in power thought, well, where are these checks and balances? That there was no real scrutiny on them to make sure that changes were going to be put in place. Now we've seen very visibly people from the ECB being pulled apart by politicians. We've seen what happens to you, the humiliation, the fact that you lose your job, the fact that cricket's name gets dragged through the mud if you don't do the things you say that you will do. Yorkshire, obviously, a huge case in point. So if anyone is doing this as a box ticking exercise and thinks they'll get away with it, then that would be incredibly foolish at that point. The level of scrutiny now means that action has to be taken, and this seems a sensible next step.
Moving on, Phil, there's a new magazine out this week, and the cover star is a good get. You spoke to Travis Head a few days after the World Cup final. How is he getting on at the time?
He'd sobered up. Just
A 5-match T20 series in India will do that, right?
Yeah. He'd enjoyed his week off. He was given a pass for the first couple of games and enjoyed that. I talked to him halfway through the starter course at the Cricket Writers end of year do on Monday last week, and so I was just getting on it as he was just coming off it, basically. So I was amazed that he responded to me. I don't really know him. I interviewed him, as you know, before the World Cup. We got on nicely, and I said, "Look, 1 in a million chance, obviously." And he said, "Yeah, all right, let's have a chat." So, and it was lovely, and he's obviously, it was a surreal week for him. He's very approachable and likable because he's quite wide-eyed about how his life has played out and how this sort of slightly raw and untamed natural talent that he had as a young kid, and which he questioned and doubted for much of his 20s, has now sort of blossomed, coalesced into this sudden streak across 2 years where he's the number one player in the world.
Well, you said it straight after the final that there was a cricket Ballon d'Or. Head winning it, right? This year, definitely, given how he played in the World
Man
Cup
of the match
final.
in the WTC here, man of the match in the semi-final, man of the match in his first game back, having smashed his hand up, and obviously man of the match in the final. Just a mad run, really, and he's a nice, approachable lad. He's never heard of Joy Division, by the way, so I found a photograph of him from 10 years ago wearing Joy Division t-shirt, Unknown Pleasures, the iconic album cover. You know it. I know he doesn't, but never mind. And he had no idea that it was Joy Division. He just liked the pattern.
You can't have it all.
He liked the pattern. And I asked him, so you're not into sort of, post-punk English northern miserableism? And he says, no, I'm more of a up and around kind of guy, which is not an expression I'd heard before.
What does that mean?
I think it means, he likes Barbie rather than Oppenheimer. I think that's what he's getting at. But yeah, it was lovely to talk to him.
He definitely bats like he prefers Barbie to Oppenheimer.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, here is a snippet of that chat Phil had with Head.
All right, then. Well, let's throw it forward. The semi-final itself, picked up man of the match in that one as well. But got to talk to you about that final, right? what were you thinking at half time, right? When you're strapping the mums and dads on and you're thinking the scale of this thing, you know, how mammoth it was, how massive it was, 130,000 people, billion watching around the world. And you strap them on, you go out there and you play like it's a game on a Sunday afternoon, right? But what's actually really going on in the Travis Head mindset, in the build up to that innings and in the first few moments?
I felt like we'd done an exceptional job to get them to where they were. The 240, it was, I thought we're right in the hunt. And honestly, it was like, I hope Davey gets off to a flyer so I can take it back with the feet. And I guess that's what you expect when you go out with David Warner, is that, okay, you come to expect Davey's in great form. Hopefully he gets off to a flyer. We can sort of be 30 or 40 for none, and I can go under radar a little bit and get through that new ball. I thought that was going to be the key. It's going to swing around. So a little bit nervous, but basically, hopefully Davey gets off to a flyer. So, and when we strolled out there in front of 100,000 people, it was pretty amazing.
Just briefly, that first 50 overs in the game, your skipper had an absolute blinder, didn't he? I mean, it was like a tactical masterclass. But there's also since come out stuff around the coaching staff as well, and how meticulously they planned and they read the conditions better even than India did. And just a word on that, really, watching it as you would have been out in the boundary and seeing the way that Pat pulled it all together, it was a tactical masterclass, as I say.
Yeah, and that's been building for a long time, and I think he's got his kudos for that, Pat, in the biggest stage, in the biggest game. So I think credit has been due for a while, and now it's come out, and people, I think, now believe or can see the process that we've gone through for a while. There's no surprises for me in terms of the way Pat led, also the support staff, because the truckload of work they put into the staff, and I'm not involved in those strategy meetings, but what they go through is in depth, and is the reason why we set it up. And definitely seeing the wicket the day before, I thought we're going to have work cut out if we bowl first, and it's going to be difficult in the back end, and that's on face value. So rocking up and speaking to Ronnie in the morning of the game, and what are you thinking? And he goes, "We're going to bowl." I was a little bit sort of taken aback at first, and
we all were.
Once you had that conversation, I just felt confident in their decision making. I said, "Okay, yeah, there's 100 different ways to skin a cat, and that's how we're going to try and do it today." So amazing. And you sit back at the end, and it was the perfect storm, I guess.
And your innings, right, the emotional journey of it, and I know it's a tricky thing to describe when you're still feeling it, and it's been so recent, but can you talk to me about the undulations of it, right, the process of it, and were there any particular moments within it when you thought, this is happening, this is happening for me right here and now?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I said the first 20, 25 balls I batted, it was probably the worst I batted the tournament. I just it just felt like it. And looking back on some of the stuff I've seen, and at the time it didn't look like the ball was doing too much, but facing it and seeing it come down, it felt two hugely different things. But the moment was probably, I think Siraj come on for his first spell, and I was able to cut the ball past point, and it felt like the ball really skipped on and had that pace in the wicket, and it just felt like it sort of slipped on, got it past point, and sort of flew to the boundary. And I was like, that was probably the moment where I felt like the wicket was okay. It's starting to feel really, really good. So, but then you've got to capitalise. I thought Marnus did an exceptional job in the partnership as well. Spin was going to be a huge factor. I didn't play the first over as well as I would have liked, and was able to get through that over. And then I felt like throughout the whole batting innings, the way we played spin, the way we were able to manipulate it around and then take our chances with some boundary hitting was, I don't think I'd be able to piece it together as well as I did again. So, but probably that moment where I was able to get that ball past point where the ball skipped on a bit, I felt like I thought we're in a really, really good position.
And it looked, certainly as you got into your innings, and I'm thinking of shots you played against Kuldeep as well, that 6 over mid-wicket, it looked like it was fearless, right? But it's not, is it? In your mind, it can't just be that you're unthinkingly just going out there, see ball, hit ball. It must be more complex than that, especially in that cauldron, that sort of atmosphere.
Yeah, that's the one thing I was like, don't clear your front leg and miss one, get bowled looking like a twat in front of 100,000 people. So, again, it was something that facing Shamsi, the left arm of the game before, and he's a lot quicker and faster through air. I was able to pick Kuldeep a little bit, and so try to pick my moments, try to pick line, and yeah, there's no doubt in those minds. He's like, I felt like we got off to a good start. You don't want to make a huge mistake and sort of throw it away and look silly in front of everyone. So, but then also you got to be attacking. You got to have some balls about you, and you got to try and take your chance when you can. So, yeah, I felt like I gave myself that opportunity. And then when I did try to attack the balls, I guess I was in the best space to do that. So, it come off.
When you get past your 100 and, you don't want to tempt fate, but right? You know in your heart of hearts, we've got this. What's that like? When it's a victory parade and you got 100 in the World Cup final?
It was a tough 25, 30 runs when they were just ticking down. And Barnes was like, at one point he was like, I want you to get the runs. And I was like, I just want to get them and get off this field. Like I was just looking the runs going down, and I think I said it to the umpires on one stage. I was just like, this is just out of its world. This is just crazy. Like, I just can't believe that this is happening. So, it just, as they ticked down and at 3 for 40, and all of a sudden it felt like we fielded for about 4 hours, 5 hours. It felt like we batted for about 15 minutes. It was just crazy. Like, sort of looked up and it was like, we need 25, 30 runs to win here. And it was like, holy moly, we're going to pull this off. So, incredible couple of hours with Marnus. Incredible to look back on it. I know, looking at the boys and in the sheds, they were loving it. The smiles on their faces, you couldn't rub it off and say, a magical couple of hours.
Did you get out deliberately just to get the standing ovation?
Mate, I would love to hit it 25 rows back and just walk straight off. I was that keen to get, like I said, with 25 runs, I was like, how quickly can we try and get this done? Because we're just, and yes, I would have loved to have stayed out there, but that's obviously, and that's not in my nature. I was just like, how can we win this as fast as we can to take all guarantees out of it and get this trophy and get out of here? So, so be. That's how it worked out to be, but I wouldn't change it for the world.
And you can read the full thing in the latest magazine that is out on Thursday. Pakistan's test tour of Australia is underway. They're in the country ahead of the first test match next week. It's been a tumultuous week off the field for both sides. So for Pakistan, Salman Butt was briefly appointed as a consultant to the selection panel, which is headed by his good mate Wahab Riaz. 24 hours later, Butt was out of the job following intense public pressure. Butt, of course, was the Pakistan captain during the spot fixing scandal of 2010 and never played for Pakistan again. Danielle Rasool on ESPN Quick Info, summing the whole thing up, wrote, Wahab accused the media of looking to besmirch the PCB's name following Butt's nomination to the panel. He said
I think Butt might have had a say in that as well a few years back.
Yeah, or Wahab by appointing him in the first place.
Yeah. And then he said he'd been accused of giving Butt, known to be a close friend of Wahab, preferential treatment, and that he wanted to shield himself against those allegations, saying that his top priority was maintaining the reputation of the PCB and his own integrity.
Bloody hell.
So an eventful week, as always.
They've been on fire, haven't they? PCB in the last few weeks.
It's always a soap opera, but it is
This
just
is
gone
another
to
level stuff, though,
another
isn't it?
level. You know, just when you think it's over, just quiet. You pick the squad for the series. After they pick the squad, they appoint Salman Butt to be a consultant for the selection panel when there's nothing really to select for quite a long time.
Every time you touch your laptop, I think it's going to fall off your two.
It is
with an arm.
precarious, yeah.
Yeah, you know what you do.
Better, yeah.
Little peek behind the curtain there.
Yeah, and it's not just been a dramatic week off the field for Pakistan. It's been a dramatic week off the field for Australia too. We've seen a war of words between a couple of Australia greats, which started with a stunning column from Mitchell Johnson on David Warner, writing in the West Australian. Johnson said, it's been 5 years and David Warner has still never really owned the ball tampering scandal. Now the way he's going out is underpinned by more of the same arrogance and disrespect to our country as we prepare for David Warner's farewell series. Can somebody please tell me why? Why a struggling test opener gets to nominate his own retirement date, and why a player at the centre of one of the biggest scandals in Australian cricket history warrants a hero sending off. Johnson didn't stop there. He also had a pop at George Bailey, the Australia head selector, who has overseen world title wins in all three formats in the last 2 years of being too close to the players. Bailey, in response, said, "I hope Johnson is okay."
Oof.
To which Johnson said, "To ask if I'm okay because I've had mental health issues is pretty much downplaying my article and putting it on mental health, which is quite disgusting, I think. It's basically having a dig at someone's mental health and saying that I must have something going on. A mental health issue has made me say what I've said. That's not the truth. That's completely opposite to the truth. I'm actually clear-minded." It's quite extraordinary to see a public row between two players who've played together so much, 80 times for Australia. And Johnson said that this sort of started with Warner taking issue with something that Johnson had written where he'd implied that Warner's form was to do with his wife's influence or something like that.
But Warner then texted Johnson,
Yeah.
and Johnson didn't like the text, and that seems to be the precursor for this. In Johnson's piece, I actually agree with a lot of what he's saying. I think there's a lot of truth in there, particularly the fact that Warner said so far out that this was going to be his sort of valedictory series. But Johnson's also said, I'm not angry. Well, clearly he is. And he said himself, if I regret anything, it's because it's a bit personal. And clearly it is. All that said, I think Bailey's response is irresponsible and rank and smug and just disgusting, really. I agree with Johnson on that too. I think if Bailey had said Johnson's essentially talking out his arse and he's saying this for personal reasons, then I think that would have been a perfectly legitimate response from Bailey, maybe with slightly different wording. But
it's just saying that
to come out and say, I hope he's okay, in that kind of really disingenuous way, I think is really poor. I don't think Bailey's going to be apologising anytime soon, but I hope he does think, that probably wasn't the way to handle this. It's just a really immature response to it. Yeah.
What do you think about Warner getting this send-off? He obviously he earmarked this months and months in advance. I don't really have an issue. I think players who've played for that length of time for their country, I think, have the right to go out when they want. I guess what Johnson is implying is that Warner shouldn't have his spot in the team totally sewn up given his recent form. But, there are debates over who replaces Warner, and it's not exactly obvious. It's going to be someone who's done the job recently and not that well.
Yeah, this one falls into the life's too short to give a toss category for me, really. Clearly, if he bags 4 noughts in a row, there might be a question mark about whether he plays that 3rd or 4th test match of the summer. I guess over in England, they do it slightly more decorously, don't they? They say it on the Monday before the game. Or in Broad's case, they say it during the test match, which to me is probably even more objectionable than saying it at the start of the summer. But anyway, whatever. Yeah. I can understand if Johnson wants to get wound up about it, but to me, it's a nothing in a... But it's a nothing squared, personally. Apart from the Bailey comment, which I wasn't aware of, but as soon as you said that does jar. That's pretty arrogant and a little bit insidious. Don't like that. Just reminded me though that on the Travis Head interview, I asked him, so how's things then with the Aussie public? So you won another one, but things haven't altogether been tickety-boo over the last few years. And he said, "Oh no, it's good until we play next time," which I thought was quite a good summary of how perhaps they feel in the dressing room as opposed to outside of it. And obviously Johnson straddles both, but once you become a media man, you become essentially sort of a voice of the people, of the public. And there was just a little glimpse into what perhaps it's like. There's a discordant relationship between the Aussie public and the Aussie inner sanctum.
Well, but also the Aussie ex-players and the Aussie current players. That's the thing that feels different to me. I don't remember really seeing that in any kind of obvious way in previous years, but we had it when... when Mel interviewed Matthew Hayden for the magazine recently, he said, I wouldn't go near the Australia job, essentially because of the way they treated his mate, Justin Langer. And it seems that there's, even however much Australia win, there's these ex-players lining up because they just don't think they're doing it right in some ways. I think the Johnson Warner thing's slightly different because that seems very much a thing between those two rather than a kind of cultural thing. But there is that chasm. And I don't know, I just don't remember that with previous Aussie sides, really.
No.
My feeling after that particular bit from Travis Head was just a sense of, I wish it was that important over here.
Yeah.
I wish there could be that sort of tension, that bit of needle, I wish cricket mattered so much in England that there could be that sort of discordance,
I think that quite a lot, and I thought that during the first ODI against West Indies. I was just imagining if this was Pakistan, right? You got Alistair Cook in the TNT studio, who just seems so relaxed. He doesn't care. He doesn't really care what happens this game. But in Pakistan, it would be front page news.
Well, the fact Pakistan must be shocked that England's coach and captain and quite a lot of their side has survived or got new contracts after the World Cup.
I reckon there's probably a Pakistani equivalent podcast which takes the piss out of English cricket in the same way we sort of do about Pakistan. It's like whatever they do, they keep their jobs.
Yeah.
Anyway, in Bangladesh, Bangladesh went 1-0 up against New Zealand at home. It's Bangladesh's second win in 3 test matches against New Zealand, who I sort of picked a weird side, in my opinion. They didn't have Santner or Ravindra after both had excellent World Cups in similar conditions.
What's the story
Is
there?
Ravindra, was he being rested after the World Cup?
No, he's in the squad, just not selected. So they wanted to pick the side based on test form, and Ajaz Patel and Ish Sodhi had good test form in Asia behind them. Both had pretty quiet test matches. They were comprehensively outbowled by the Bangladesh spinners. There's 100
by Glenn Phillips.
And by Glenn Phillips, yeah. There's 100 on captaincy debut for Shanto.
Right.
And 10 wickets in the match for Taijul Islam, who out of the limelight has very quietly picked up 187 test wickets at 31.
I was shocked by that myself, yeah.
But what a result for Bangladesh.
Brilliant result.
And actually was a pretty low-key win in that they were on top for the majority of that test match. And that's despite, by the way, Kane Williamson scoring test match 100, number 29.
Yeah. Yes and no, because that third innings is often the problem for particularly a team that's trying to find its identity, and perhaps in the lower reaches. But that third innings, because New Zealand had a lead of 10-15 on first innings, and then Shanto, the skipper, made a really good 100. And then they batted New Zealand out of sight. But just on Shanto, really good to see that, because he's a good young player, but he had a really bad World Cup. Purely coincidental that I'd backed him as going to be one of the young players of the tournament. It was literally appalling. But again, similar to sort of Shai Hope, they're trying to foster something fresh and new, and that's a huge moment really for that young lad who's been given a very tricky job to front up the new generation, really, and that's a really, really big win. New Zealand don't go anywhere and play half-assed cricket. No,
it also made me think, bringing it back to England again, it's such a shame that England haven't gone to Bangladesh for a test tour for so long. It was 2016 before that India tour the last time they went, and Bangladesh gave pretty much everyone that comes to Bangladesh a really good go. I mean,
beat Australia, didn't they?
Beat Australia in a test match not that long ago. They also very, very nearly beat India this year or the end of last year. I think India only won by 3 wickets in a test match.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're almost guaranteed to get a good series if England went. Yeah, it's been now more than 7 years since they last toured. South Africa have announced their squad for their upcoming series against India. A couple of interesting names in the test squad. Beddingham's in it.
Great news.
Not that long ago, moved as a future England player. And Tristan Stubbs is in there as well. Obviously highly rated as one of the most exciting young T20 players in the world. But he's also got a very good first-class record, averages more than 40, and has been playing first-class cricket in South Africa recently. So I guess he's one of those players when you're sort of catastrophizing about the future of international cricket. Oh, he might never play a test match. Well, he might get that opportunity in the next couple of weeks.
And that's why Beddingham is great, really, that he's in that side, because it gives everybody a bit of pep, right? And you retain a lot of hope for South African cricket, I think. And again, the World Cup's further evidence of it. They will forever produce good cricketers. If they can persuade them to play for them, then there you go. Just on that, by the way, I saw a De Kock interview from just before the World Cup that I caught a couple of days ago. My word, if ever a player was preparing himself to walk away from it all, that was the interview, saying cricket's barely my 4th favourite sport.
In fairness, he's been saying that for about 10 years.
He has, but then he's still in the T20 side, isn't he?
Yeah.
So he will have another send-off, another swan song next summer.
So the South Africa coach, Rob Walter, was talking about this, and he sort of implied that De Kock really didn't want to play anything after the World Cup, and Walter sort of persuaded him, no, you got to at least play the T20 stuff, please. Just play the T20.
Yeah, but it's not baseball. That's his issue. He's only ever really liked baseball and fishing. This is what he said: baseball, fishing, golf, and then cricket.
But to be honest, I sort of wonder, out of the England main 11 players, whatever, for how many of them is cricket actually their favourite sport?
Well, how many would rather be a professional golfer than a professional
It's got to
cricketer?
be
All
more
of
than
them.
50%.
Yeah, all of them. Every single one of them.
And then you got football in there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them would prefer to be footballers.
Yeah.
Stokes, to his credit, doesn't really like football,
Yeah.
but he certainly likes golf.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's golf, football, and
And I
cricket.
guess if
somewhere
gaming
down the line.
counts as a sport as well, that's probably up there as well.
Very much so.
Anyway, Adelaide Strikers won the Women's Big Bash over the weekend, with Georgia Adams winning her 4th trophy of 2023 following the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy, the Charlotte Edwards Cup, and the 100. A lot of people saying, why isn't she in the England squad? I guess England have, in the recent past, looked to the future more. Adams is in her late 20s, I think. She also had a pretty miserable tournament on a personal level as well. I think it averaged 5 with a bat.
Really?
So it's not exactly form that's knocking the door of the selectors.
It was a good finish, though. I watched the end of that game, and Wellington was brilliant with the ball, and it was absolute euphoria as well around a packed ground. That it really struck me the number of young blokes in the crowd wearing the shirts, hugging each other as well. And it's so much more democratized, that game in Australia than it is over here. Although obviously we are making steps.
We're catching up.
Slowly but surely,
yeah. 2 other very big results in the women's game this week. Bangladesh women beat South Africa for the first time in a T20I in South Africa. 16-year-old all-rounder Shauna Akhtar took a fifer. She was in the team of the tournament at the Under-19 World Cup early in the year, so she's one to watch. And Pakistan women have won their first ever T20I series outside Asia or Ireland. They're 2-0 up against New Zealand in New Zealand after 2 games at the moment. And as we mentioned earlier, Nathan Lyon has joined Lancashire for pretty much the entirety of the 2024 summer, which is one hell of a signing, obviously. And the story of the week is undoubtedly Uganda qualifying for the T20 World Cup at the expense of Zimbabwe. It's their first ever appearance at a senior World Cup. And for Zimbabwe not to qualify for a 20-team tournament as a full member, that's a pretty big deal as well. We'll talk more about that next week. Andrew asks, if New York versus Delhi in a 10-over match in Abu Dhabi isn't the most soulless sporting event in history, then what is? The Abu Dhabi T10 has been happening this week. We're not going to talk about the cricket, obviously, but we did have a think about what our favourite Abu Dhabi 10 teams are, because some of the lineups are quite something. Joe, you've been doing your research.
Yeah, I'm Sam Palmy till I die, having just heard of them. What a team. So you've got your county stalwarts in Ben Rain.
He's lethal in Abu Dhabi, Ben Rain.
Jake Linsott. Throw in Moeen Ali. Then you got Faf du Plessis, Deval Brevis, Jason Holder, Baz Dalida. What a side.
You've also got a 41-year-old Mohammed Irfan as well.
What, Big
Is
Mo?
he in there
Big
as well?
Mo, yeah. It might not have played the recent game, but there was definitely a game earlier in the competition where Moeen was captaining a 41-year-old Mohammed Irfan.
Stunning. And also I was doing further investigations into my new team, Sam Palmy, who makes some pretty audacious claims on their website. Welcome to the world of Sam Palmy, the biggest franchise in the cricketing world. With a rich history and an impressive track record, Sam Palmy has established itself as a force to be reckoned with on the international cricketing stage. So there you go.
Yeah.
Alex Hales is really enjoying the food.
Yeah.
The food in the whole country is so great, he says in a press release that landed in my inbox
The
2 or 3
headlines
days
just
ago.
keep coming, right?
Quote, I eat everything. There are so many restaurants to choose from, says Alex. You are really spoilt for choices. Put me down for one of each.
Yeah.
He says, the Abu Dhabi team batter. Good on him.
That's his team, Abu Dhabi team.
So I'm
Team Abu Dhabi.
Team Abu Dhabi.
Team Abu Dhabi.
I'm a Bangla Tigers fan myself. So up top, you've got Pathum Nissanka opening the batting with Jordan Cox, who hit 90-odd the other
In
day.
fairness, I would watch that, those two.
But get this, Kusal Mendes at 3,
Oh, what?
Avishka Fernando at 4, Dominic Drakes at 5, Dasan Shanakar 6, Daniel Sams. Then you've got Benny Howell, skipper, at 8, Carlos Brathwaite, Ronnie Mustafa, the UAE all-rounder, and then Heather Ali, but not the Heather Ali. And you've also got Shannon Gabriel.
Do you think they got the wrong Heather Ali in? But
Quite possibly.
And Shannon Gabriel as well.
Yeah. Yes, it's
Benny's
it
putting
is-
that rogues gallery together, and they're all singing from the same sheet.
It is such a weird tournament. You know,
It's horrifying.
You've got random Indian guys who've been out of the professional game for a few years. There's a 32-year-old Jamaican called Kanar Lewis, who's a batter who averages less than 20 in professional T20 cricket. He's never bowled a ball, and in the last year, he's only played cricket in the UAE. So he's only played in either the ILT20 or the Abu Dhabi T10. He didn't play in the Caribbean cricket last year. I guess I find it basically unwatchable because it just feels so transactional. It's like I understand why some players are playing in it, but you know,
it's devastating.
What are they playing for? You're supposed to at least try and pretend it means. I guess Sam Palmy's website is pretending it means something, but watching it, you don't really feel
possibly pretending
anything.
Too much.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, moving on. Joe, there's a new magazine out. Obviously, there's that interview with Travis Head in it, but what else is there?
Loads and loads.
You always say that, don't you? As a sort of build up to trying to remember what the hell is actually in it.
Just to give myself a bit of time. No, I've actually got the blurb here, so I don't have to remember.
Okay, right.
So, no, that was genuine. It just felt like as we were
there is
getting
actually
into
loads
sprint last week,
around.
just felt like there was a lot of different stuff in there. To run through a few bits, we got Heather Knight to do an exclusive column reacting to Meg Lanning's retirement. We had a really good interview with AUB de Villiers by Mel Farrell, in which he reveals that he basically didn't have full use of one eye for the last 2 years of his career when he was still scoring quite a lot of runs. There is an exclusive with Anya Shrubsall about her career. Taha goes back to 2013-14 Ashes. Don't know why you'd want to do that, but to pick through those awful memories. And there's a load of World Cup stuff. A really brilliant piece from Matt Roller to set that off on India's tournament and how it all went wrong at the end. Obviously, Travis Head. My Jonathan Trott interview, which some people might have heard a bit of on the podcast a week or so ago. And then a couple of bits I think we're going to talk about in just a little bit more depth. I did a piece following the death of Bishan Bedi, the great Indian left-arm spinner. Late October, I think he died. The piece is on the art of finger spin and its evolution in the modern game. I enjoyed doing some research on Bedi, who's was a real character, unapologetically a purist. Beautiful to watch himself and had a
fundamentalist, isn't he?
Really? He really is, exactly that. Had this very, very rigid idea of how you should spin a cricket ball, and if people didn't fall into that, they were basically cheats, no matter what the ICC ruling said. So, very fond of calling Murali a chucker. Once said in an interview, you call it 800 wickets. I call it 800 run-outs. That's a bit of a cheap line, but also wasn't afraid to criticise Indians. He called out Habjan Singh's arm ball. Described bowlers who felt he was getting an unfair advantage through their action as the scourge of cricket. Didn't like one-day cricket either. Called the IPL a scam and hated what limited overs cricket, particularly T20, I think he's talking about or was talking about, has done to spin bowling and said it's reduced them to containing bowlers. So I spoke to 3 English spinners actually, and John Embury, Phil Tufnell, and Min Patel about finger spin, what it's turned into and what its future might hold, given that T20 is so popular and finger spin, if you're a conventional finger spin bowler, you don't tend to go great in T20. The stats show you've got to have mystery around you, and as Bailey said, mystery is not the true art of finger spin, which Tufnell was interesting. He said, any evolution of the game is great, and he would have bowled very differently if he was coming through now, and that's fine. I thought Min Patel was probably the most interesting of the 3. He's back in the day, he played a couple of tests for England, and he was Kent left arm spinner. Say in the mould of Bailey's probably overdoing it, but he was an aesthetically nice spin bowler to watch, quite old fashioned, I suppose, in style. And he is now head of Kent's talent pathway, and talked about what he sees with young spinners coming through and how quickly it's changed. So just a quote from him. It says, growing up, I didn't really know anything other than beating the outside edge because we didn't get front for LBWs. Your best modes of dismissal were nicking people off, caught slip, or caught somewhere on the drive, on the offside. Had I grown up with a completely different menu of cricket, where you're bowling 4 overs and trying not to get whacked, I might have been a very different bowler. He talks about Graham Swan, who he said was always aggressive and had this drift and shape. And he says you don't really see that with young spin bowlers coming through because that's not what they're trying to do. They're basically just trying to keep the stumps in play as much as possible because that is what T20 has taught them. And then when we come to talk about who do England take on a test tour to India to try and take 20 wickets on spinning pitches, it's no surprise that you don't have those bowlers available. Also, we talked a bit about how hard it is to find mystery spin. Why do England have no mystery spinners when it seems like Afghanistan have about half a dozen, India have got plenty? And he said, fundamentally, it's just how much you bowl, and spin bowlers in this country don't bowl enough, and they spend 80% of that time working on their stock delivery, whereas in Afghanistan, or probably maybe more likely in Pakistan, but Afghan Indian bowlers just bowl all day and they're just trying weird things. And he said it's not something you can really coach. Tufnell said he tried it in his career, just couldn't do it. And he said it's got to be built in early. It's very hard to take a cricketer who's already on a talent pathway and say, this is how you bowl mystery spin. It's got to come earlier than that. And England have never really mastered it. Haven't even come close to mastering it.
I guess the Rahan Ahmed is an interesting case study there, in that he was stronger at his mystery ball than the conventional stock ball, and actually it's only a year in, but it looks like the conventional stuff can be coached more easily. And I guess we're holding a lot of hopes on not just Rahan, but his younger brother. I think he's 15 years old and he's likely to be in England's under-19 World Cup squad. He's a spinner as well.
I think he just was. I think he was. I saw that this morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's hang all our hopes on those two teenagers. That sounds really, really interesting. Phil, you wrote a piece on Wes Hall, which I read last night, and it's excellent.
Thanks,
I didn't know that much about Wes Hall. He was sort of just a figure on lists.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know anything about the man.
Well, indeed, and I say that myself, that Wes Hall was a myth. It was like a bedtime story passed on by my dad, who saw him in 1966 at the Oval. Him and Charlie Griffith, and you know the headlines of him, but to actually spend an hour with him, 86 years young, still got the sparkle in the eye, was, as rewarding a moment as I've had really in this job. And I was just trying to tell his story in the context of what West Indies cricket used to mean. And there are still threads and echoes of that now, of course, but back in the late 50s, early 60s, under Sir Frank Worrell, who was Wes Hall's mentor, idol, best man at his wedding, and the architect of Wes Hall's professional life, in that he plotted out his 10-year journey from the late 50s through the 60s. And what that era meant for cricket, but what that era meant far more widely for Caribbean identity. To talk to one of the people on the front line, and somebody who's so articulate and eloquent as Wes Hall, who lived 1,000 lives and always retained his silver tongue and, as I say, the glint in the eye. To hear from somebody who was on the front line was a very moving experience, really. So I found it quite easy to write, because there's just so much heart and soul in the story. It also actually coincided with, I might mention it on the show as well before, Vanessa Batch's piece. Now, she's a Trinidadian writer, and she's brought out a book called Son of Grace, which is the biography of Sir Frank Worrell, and it's the definitive biography of Worrell. And this came out in the recent months, and it was a really useful background research to help me put this thing together with Wes Hall. And the Worrell story is as much a part of this as the Hall story itself, and obviously the canvas on which it's all painted is that extraordinary moment, really, that extraordinary moment of sort of racial and societal awakening, and it's all played out on the cricket pitch. And if that sounds a bit highfalutin, CLR James said to the team that went to Australia for the now iconic 60-61 tour, he said, if you go and compete with Australia, that will be the end of colonialism. Now, that's a slightly grand claim, but that was the nature of the discourse at the time. Wes Hall was constantly reading about West Indian history as a young man, very clever bloke. That was the mood. That was the tenor of the time, right? And so, extraordinary time, really, and all the more so to speak to one of its one of its great sort of torchbearers, really. So yeah, pleased with how it came out, and what an honour! What an honour! We always do our best 11s, don't we, of people that we've interviewed, because we're very sad.
We don't always do it.
No, not always, but it has been done.
It's not a monthly catch-up.
It has been done, and Wes Hall, the fastest bowler of his era.
He sneaks in there, does he?
He sneaks in now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's he usurped?
Oh, I don't know. I have to revisit it, but
it feels like a sort of self-indulgent Christmas podcast.
I was going to say,
we've
got to do a podcast on December 27th.
Do we?
Yeah.
Do you? Speak for yourself.
Yeah. Some of us do. Anyway, any other highlights from the magazine?
Yeah.
Loads.
It's honestly probably the best one we've done in years. Ridiculous, really. England have been humiliated. It's the middle of winter. No one really gives a toss. And we've done the
famously the one that
magazine.
sells fewest sales on the newsstand just because of the time of year.
Yeah.
Go and get it.
Make it all worthwhile.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, as always, you can get it from wisden.com/shop. We'll leave a link in the description, as always. That is everything for today. Cheers, Joe. Cheers, Phil. Cheers, listeners. There's a new feature, by the way, on Spotify where you can give feedback or leave comments if you've listened to the show. If you want to be negative, though, don't bother, because they only get published if I press approve. So if you want to do that...
Although we also do welcome constructive criticism.
We do, yeah, that's true. That's true. We do welcome that. But if you want me to read it, you can write whatever you want, but it's only getting published if I like it. So
Yas will never tell us because we're all too fragile to.
And there's that's a new feature on Spotify. I think it's called Spotify Q&A, if that's where you listen. And if you don't listen on Spotify, you can always get in touch on Twitter or at podcast@wisden.com. Anyway, that's it for today. We'll be back next week after the second and third West Indies England ODIs.